Hello and welcome to number 16 of the Inventive Marketing Club. This month, I thought it would be good to look at search engine optimization, and more specifically, really focusing down on a specific page. Maybe getting one of our product pages or a key landing page and focusing down and trying to improve the search ranking for that. So that's what we're going to look at. And we've got special guest Chris Richards joining us. He's going to be the disembodied voice. Do you want to say hello, Chris?
Hello, everybody. How are we doing?
And I've worked with Chris for quite some time now on search engine optimization. In fact, he's the search engine optimization guru. So, you know, my limits only go to here. He knows everything else. And looks at it in a very scientific way. So I've often worked with Chris when we have a specific problem to solve, so we can look at a website and really go through the details, particularly when it's quite competitive as well. So Chris can come in and help give us an edge on that because he really knows his stuff. So Chris is going to be giving us some extra detail as we talk through this today. Hello, everyone. Hi, Joy. Hi, Sonia. Oh, you said the sound's gone off. Try just refreshing the page if you can. Hopefully everyone else can hear me. But if you just refresh the page, usually that sorts things out. Okay, so hello to everyone who is new. I know we've got some new charities on board as well. We were giving them free access to the club for as long as needed, really. So just so they know, this is a monthly webinar. On a variety of topics, we're going to have different advice, tips, strategy. We've covered, this is the 16th one, so we've done quite a few already. Please ask questions as you go along and make sure you do access the previous webinars, resources, and the podcast. I'll make sure I link to those at the end, but they're all in the clubhouse for those of you who are familiar. So where do we start? Let's set the scene, really, and talk about what on-page search optimization is. It's really all the things that are in your control, everything that you can do on the website or on a particular page that you're trying to optimize. And this is where you should start, really. This is the not necessarily the easiest, but it's everything that you can control in terms of improving your search engine ranking position. And that's another term I'm going to use throughout. We've got search engine optimization, SEO, but we've also got search engine ranking position, or SERP. And this is the position you appear in Google search results. It could be other companies' search results like Bing, but most people don't use those. So we're just going to consider Google. And so this is the position you come, either the number on the page or the number which page you appear on. If you want a bit more of a basic primer on search engine optimization, do go and watch session number 6, because I go through a bit more of a general search SEO strategy for your whole site, and I call out a lot of terms and a lot of systems that I'm going to refer to today would be talked about in a bit more detail. Anything for you, Chris, to add in terms of on-page SEO? How do you look at it?
I was just going to give you more of a formal definition as well, if that's useful.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, on-page SEO or search engine optimization is essentially the practice of optimizing an individual web page, basically looking to try and rank it higher in the organic listings on Google or any other search engine, frankly. Basically, on-page refers to both the content of the page and indeed the HTML source code as well, not just the visible content, but the code that often sits behind it that goes unseen, can be optimized, which is key to sort of reflect on the fact it's the opposite of off-page SEO, which refers to obviously links and other signals coming from external sites. But the way I tend to approach on-page SEO is you look at it from a perspective of well, firstly, page one gives you clues. So look at your competitors that are on page one. What's the content? How much content do they have? What different types of media are they using? Are they just using text, or have they got images and videos and tables and all sorts of stuff like that? That's a good place to start. Look at what's working well for your competitors.
Yeah, and then take it from there. Well, we'll go through some of that in a bit more detail, actually, because I'm going to talk about the case study of one of our clients, Selmac. It's a really good example of something that worked well, but also is a very good step-by-step process. So thanks for that, Chris.
No worries.
So Yeah, Selmac, we've been working with Selmac for a number of years. They've got a huge site. So they sell high-value metalworking machinery. So big guillotines that cut metal, press brakes that fold it, mills that sort of cut big ridges in it, drills and all that sort of stuff, as well as lasers and plasmas, which just cut holes in different ways. It's all really cool stuff. Big machinery. So it's quite expensive to the end user, but it's obviously going to be used as part of a batch process in an engineering firm to produce lots of widgets and make their money. So it really is a big capital expense. And that sort of works in our favor in terms of SEO, because it's worth investing money when you have higher value products, because search optimization can take a little bit of time to get going, but once it's going, it pays back quite nicely. And it's worth the time and effort putting that in. If you're selling something that maybe is £1 a piece, then search optimization, it's not worthwhile. It's just a lot harder to get those gains, particularly if it's a competitive market, because you'll be spending some time either working with imagery, video, or text, or SEOs to develop the content that's going to rank highly, and it may not be worthwhile unless you can sell the items in the millions or more. So obviously, if you've got high value product or high value service, then this search optimization is a really good way forward. But it is broadly anyway. It just works a lot easier. So what we noticed with Selmac, and actually, let me step back a little bit. We've been working with Selmac for a little while, but prior to this process, we'd actually gone through a full search optimization audit with Chris and Selmac to really identify a lot of the weak points in either on their website technically, or in some of their link building strategy, or any of the work they were doing online, really. So that audit, which was quite a substantial piece of work, was absolutely core in terms of really for Chris to get to know Selmac really well and understand how he can help, but also to find out where the holes were. So this is a little step on from that, really. Now, one of their competitors was starting to be noticed a little bit, and they were noticing that they were actually losing a little bit of business to this one competitor, and that started to irk them a little bit. So they wanted to fight back, and they wanted to dominate the search results, if at all possible, for their chosen keyword, which is CNC fiber laser. Now, it's no mean feat. I mean, it's a bit easier. I say it's easier, but there's a caveat to that. It's slightly easier given that their niche isn't so competitive as other markets, but still requires a bit of work. But that was the challenge. We wanted to dominate the competition when it comes to people searching for that keyword online. And also that the landing page for Selmac, they weren't appearing anywhere for that particular keyword on Google. They were appearing for other ones because we've been working on those, but this needed some quick work. And so this is the process we went through. Okay, so the method in essence was we needed to do that competitor analysis that Chris has talked about, and we're going to talk through that process a bit more. We then need to look at what changes need to be made, either technically or in content, or in terms in links to the site, what needs to be done, and then measuring it and then tweaking to improve that over time. Because one of the key things with search optimization is it doesn't pay back straight away. You can't just make changes on a website and you'll immediately start moving up the rankings if you're lucky. I mean, typically, Chris, how long does it take after making some sort of changes on a website before you start to see some impact if you're lucky?
Typically, you'll see that some impact will happen the next time that Googlebot comes back to visit the page, and effectively updates the cached version of that page. Because by the fact that you're making changes to that page, Google will come back, see the page has changed in some way, and then reassess it. So you might get a small bump. Often it can be down before it goes up. But
yeah, you have said that before.
Yeah, normally within a couple of weeks. But to see real results, particularly if it's in a more competitive area, probably 3 months.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's about usual. You can sometimes start to see things before that, but I think it's good to have the overall understanding that it might take 3 months or 90 days.
2 weeks to see something.
Yeah.
2 to 2.5 weeks, let's say, to see something happen, or some movement or start to move. But in terms of seeing the full benefit of the work that you've done, you really need to give it 60 to 90 days.
I'm just going to type a note in here to Sonia, who seems to have lost all sound and video. Try refreshing the page to get this back. If that works. Technology, hey? It's obviously because so many people are online at the moment. Cool, thanks for that. So that was our method, really, going through some analysis. What's out there already? What are they doing? What changes can we make to improve upon that? And then measuring the result and making changes based upon that. Okay, so step one, the competitor analysis. Now, this is formed around a keyword correlation report. Before we got there, as I said, we did a site audit. So I think this was probably 6 months, 9 months prior to this. We'd done a full site audit where Chris really had a good look at everything on the website, so we could bring some of fill some of those holes in and bring the site up to date. Also gives Chris a good understanding. But what he was able to do in this case was really have a sort of fine look at the page that we wanted to optimize, what keywords we wanted to rank well for, and then basically looking at the competition to see how well they were doing and what we needed to do to be better than them, and then basically interpreting those actions. Would you say that's fair? That's typically an overview of how it works.
That's a fair assessment of how it works, yes.
We'll go into a bit more detail about it later. So I don't want to sort of drag people through exactly what a correlation report looks like, because it is incredibly detailed. And as much as I understand about search optimization, it blows my mind, frankly. So we'll come back to that. So the process we went through is we got everyone on a call, and this was really important. I think for such detail like this, it's a bit difficult to do it asynchronously, either via email or some other chat system. You've got to have some sort of meeting or group call. So we got on board Claire, who was the sort of marketing admin for Selmac and managing that side of it. I think actually the director as well got involved. Our SEO, which was Chris in this case, and the web dev, that's me. So we all got together really to make sure that as Chris was talking us through the report, we really understood exactly what was going on and what changes we needed to make, and we could make decisions straight away, which was important. So we had a look through the report, and it really did need interpreting. It's quite complicated, but it came out with some good ideas. Looked through, found the easy wins. What is going to give us the biggest bang or movement in SERP, search engine ranking position, for the effort that we're going to put in. And then we use Basecamp to manage all of that. Now, for those who've worked with me before, we use Basecamp for all of our sort of project management things. And it's really good just because it keeps everything together and everyone knows what work has been done at the time. So you can use what you like, but it's a good idea to make sure everyone's on board at the beginning, and then you go through the process of what you're going to achieve, who's going to do it, and then you can get on with the work. So just a little bit of an extract from the keyword correlation report to show you here. As I said, we're going to go through in a bit more detail. But this is just an extract where I highlighted, as Chris was talking through it, some of the different areas on here. So like word counts, the keywords in different tags, how many images are being used, and that sort of thing. So this is the sort of detail it goes into. But maybe if we go on to the next slide, Chris and I can talk through some of the observations that either he came up with or I could help with as we were going through the site. Chris, if you can think back to Selmac, what were the sort of the core issues with that page at the time?
Biggest issue, probably the biggest issue, that it wasn't in the index. So it was not indexed at the time. So that was probably the biggest issue that I remember, because if it's not in the index, nobody's ever going to find it.
Yeah, and this means it was a page that was visible publicly. Everyone could see it. There was nothing wrong with the page. It worked. There was no errors on it. But due to an issue with Yoast, and Yoast, we often use, it's a plugin for WordPress that gives you additional, it allows you to specify various bits of information from an SEO point of view. It was actually telling Google not to index the page. For some reason, it was basically, Selmac's a vast site, and through something had happened in the past to make that page non-indexed. So Chris, that was the first thing that we needed to rectify, because otherwise all the work we would do wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. Yeah,
that's key. Obviously, if it's not indexed, you're not going to be able to find it from a perspective of searching for it using a keyword.
Yeah, exactly. And what are the other key things when you've sort of analysed the competition? What are the key things that came up?
They had a suboptimal title tag, so the title of the page wasn't keyword rich, which it is now, which is great. They didn't have enough content in comparison to their competitors, and their competitors were using more different types of media from memory. So they were using, image, video, etc., tables, which they weren't doing, enough. There was no schema markup on the page, or very, very little from memory markup, which tells Google extra bits of information about, the content of a page. There was a number of little things, but they all add up to, one bigger issue.
Yeah, that's right. I remember one of the top competitors, I can't remember the name of it, but I remember one of the reasons it was ranking highly is just it had a lot of content on there, a lot of reasonably good content talking about not just a light overview of the product or the product set, but lots of detail about that whole sort of area. I mean, bear in mind, this is to do with laser machinery. So it's quite niche stuff in terms of who buys it. But this page had a lot of detail on not only the types of machines, but what lasers were, how they worked, and all of that sort of stuff. A lot of detail.
I would say that that page that you're referring to versus this CELMAC page at the time, Google saw that page as the authority on the subject. It saw, so that was why it was ranking so well. Had lots of content, covered the topic very thoroughly, lots of sort of subsections of content, drilling down into things in more detail, which is something at the time CELMAC were just not doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's easy with marketing to feel you're actually achieving a lot, but you might just be doing a lot of work. You might be doing a lot of email marketing, a lot of social posts, and you might overlook certain things like SEO because you feel, well, the page is there, we've got the content on it, all we need to do is get people to it. But actually, with search optimization, it's thinking about, as Chris said, what can you do to make that page the very best page that can answer someone's question about whatever it is they're typing in. So something you also noticed was the page that we were trying to improve was not placed at all on Google, or if it was, Google wasn't reporting it. It was not in the first 100 SERPs or first 100 ranking positions. So yeah, it's as good as not ranked at all.
So there's two issues. The first issue was that it wasn't in the index at all.
Yeah.
So that when that issue was resolved, the next issue was, like you said, it was not in the top 100. So it was in the index, but you'd have to go 10 or 11 pages deep in Google to find it.
That's right. And no one's going to see it there. No. Something else you're looking at is the title tag. So that was the main tag that's often shown up in the browser tab bar. It's also the one that's shown to Google people who are searching Google, so it's shown in the little snippet result. That wasn't really optimized, was it? I can't remember the original one. I think it was very simple. So that needed a bit of improvement. Yes. You also noticed, and this was not to do with that specific page generally, but there were other news articles and reference articles talking about laser machinery, but they weren't linking back to that one page, were they?
Yeah, so it's commonly called the hub and spoke approach. So the hub page being a page which covers a topic in a lot of detail, but quite broadly. And then you have the spokes which cover or may cover the topic or mention the topic in a more focused way. And then what you tend to do then is link those smaller focused pieces back to the hub page, which helps give Google some additional signals that this page is about this topic, because you've got lots of pages on a similar or subtopic linking back to it, if that makes sense. It gets a bit complicated without having to be able to probably visually explain it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you've got this particular page which is talking about laser machinery or CNC laser machinery specifically, it might be that there is a knowledge base about how to use a particular controller device for one of these laser machines, and in which case that's very specific. So that's something that can be written as a different article, a blog article somewhere, but make sure that that article is linked back. And I think what Chris is saying is making sure any article that's relating to that core topic links back through to that page.
Yes.
And they weren't. So that was a trick missed. Also, something that's quite important to you are external links, or to search optimization, I should say, is getting external links from other websites. If you don't have any, again, it's a link through to a page is a sign, or a sign of trust in that content to some degree, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, so it's a vote of confidence to some extent, is what, and it's just going back to the title tag side of things for a sec, Ben. Just thinking back, just looking through some of my notes here, they also didn't have the keyword in the main heading, so they didn't have the CNC fiber laser in the main heading, and then they weren't using, they didn't have optimized headings on the page in terms of the content of the page wasn't optimized. It was just written. There's a fine line between writing content for a visitor, visiting the page, and also then tweaking that so that it has an element of SEO in the mix without going over the top, and that there is a bit of a fine art to that.
Yeah, without just repeating the keywords several times.
Other key elements on the page. So the title, meta title is one key area. The H1 or the main heading on the page is another key area, and then obviously the content itself. Making sure that keywords are placed strategically throughout the content. Yeah,
and I think one of the general rule or general comment would be to make sure the keywords or variations of those keywords are placed in heading titles.
Correct.
Correct. Something else you brought out, and I didn't realize quite the strength of this, but it is important to have a variety of content. So not just have text on the page, but use things like lists, bullet lists, images which have the keyword in the name or alt text, tabular data, video.
Yes, all of the above. I mean, things like the various different things of media. It's all ways of giving Google signals of a topic of a page. So you might have an image of a particular fiber laser machine, and the image should be named the name of that fiber laser machine. So Google can read that, and then also there's other bits and pieces you can do as well. There's alt tags, which is effectively a way of adding a tag that you can't see on the page. It's mainly used for people who have sight issues. They can't see very well. To explain what the picture is to them if they're using a special kind of reader on the page. But Google can read that and take that as a signal. And you can also go one step further, and you can also put a title on an image, which will, when you hover over an image, it will come up with a title. And again, depending on the competitive nature of what niche or area you're working in, depends on how many of these things you tend to need to do. But with images, there are multiple ways of getting that information across to Google. List items, again, this comes down to looking at what your competition's doing. Again, page one leaves clues. So, people are on page one for a reason. If you look at it, and, they're using lists and tables and you're not, it might be a good idea to see if you can incorporate that into your content. But no doubt we'll come on to that later when we look at the correlation reports.
Something else that came out of the report, and this was specifically on the report rather than an observation, is to increase the word count to at least over 1,400 words on the page. In my experience, when I speak to a lot of people developing a website, they want to keep the content trim and simple. And I understand that. And a lot of people believe actually you should have less on the page, that people don't read that much. And to a certain extent, people don't want to read too much until it's something that they're interested in. So even if we forget SEO for a little bit and we think about, well, if this is a page that genuinely is interesting and talks about how CNC fiber lasers work and how you can improve your productivity and your capacity in your business with CNC fiber lasers, then the more information, the better on this one page, surely, where you are going to provide lots of detail and information rather than expecting people to click around the internet and compile that together. If you're the ultimate guide or the ultimate resource on this, that's going to be better for them. What people don't like doing, though, is people don't like investing their time in something, whether that's a video or text, if they don't know if it's going to be any good. So I think striking a balance between having upfront content that sets the scene and shows people you know what you're talking about and you can answer their question quickly, whether that's in a strap line or an image or a video, and then providing more and more detail as they go down, written in an interesting way, broken up maybe with different images and video and lists. Again, using a variety of different content is a good way of breaking that up to make it more interesting. So for a lot of people, if we came to help optimize their page, they might go, what? I've got to not only write that amount of content, but are people actually going to read it? I think they will. But also, it's going to be useful for Google when it comes to that page to understand that you really know what you're talking about when it comes to this topic. Would you say that's fair, Chris?
I would also add that content length is something that is based on what is on page one and what Google wants to see on page one often. So let me give you an example. So there's some search or keywords you may search for where the results of each page may well be, each page is 4,000 or 5,000 words long. So to try and compete in that space, often you'll need to have roughly the average word count of page one to sort of like to get there. You don't want to be miles over and you don't want to be miles under. So I would say that most pages that I see when I look at, they don't have enough content, but you don't have to, write thousands and thousands of words. It might be a case that, you're in a particular niche where the average the average word count on the page is 2,000 words, and you've got 1,500. You just need to add those extra 500 words. It shouldn't be seen as a massive task, because often it's not. Often you can just be either a little bit over or a little bit under.
Yeah, and often you might have the text already on your site. It's about bringing it together into one place.
Correct. You might have it spread out over the site. I've looked at sites like that before. With you as well, Ben. We've looked at sites where they've got content that can be brought onto one page. Adding things like FAQs from another page onto the main page quite quickly increases word count and is useful to the user. It
is, yeah, absolutely. And talking about FAQs, so one of the things you mentioned was schema markup. And again, I know what schema markup is and know how to implement it. And for those who don't, I've talked about a little bit in previous webinars, but is essentially code that you can't see that gives some context and definition to the content that you've put on your page to Google. So you may have a table of information, or in fact, more specific to this, you may have your frequently asked questions. So you've got a question and then an answer and a question and an answer and a question and an answer. That's fine for you and I who are visiting the page. We can understand that. We can see maybe the question is in bold and the answer is directly underneath it. But from Google's point of view, it doesn't necessarily know that without a lot of work, and it might get it wrong. Google's pretty good actually at pulling out detail like that. But if you're able to, on the question, say, this is the question with a little bit of code, schema code, or structured data, and then this is the answer, and then you tie the two together, then Google knows exactly which question and which answer go together. And it's a lot easier for Google and other search engines to index. And there is a higher chance they may surface that information on Google search results, and it adds towards your overall becoming the ultimate guide and being better than your competitors in terms of thoroughness. I think that's it. Let's leave that page for the moment and have a look at the next step. So really, that was the first step, looking at what we can improve on the site based on this correlation report. Now, I know I keep talking about it a little bit, but I don't want to scare you with the amount of information in it just yet. But bear in mind, it's essentially a computed list of comparisons and what you to competitor websites and what you need to do to be better than them, so you become number one position. It's not guaranteeing anything, but it's just essentially looking at the numbers and telling you what you need to do to improve. But we'll come back to that. So step 2, the changes. So this is the fun bit. This is where we start getting into some of the action and making changes to the page, maybe improving some of the links to other pages. And essentially, I think we've maybe this is something we've come up with when we look at other people's sites, is creating the ultimate guide to whatever, whether it's CNC fiber laser, or actually, Heidi, you talking about your tourism site. It could be the ultimate guide to pubs and restaurants in Herefordshire. Whatever you're trying to promote, you want to make sure that it is not only great for people because you're providing tons of value and useful information, but also you've got the right, it's done in the right way that Google's going to like it too. So these are some of the things that we did. We made sure the right keyword, which was CNC fiber laser in this case, was in the heading. So that's the first thing we did. So that went into the main heading across the page. And I'll give you a bit of a walkthrough of the page in a minute. The main heading was in the page, and it was also in the main title tag. So that's what people see in the Google search results. We also wanted to optimize the meta descriptions. That's what's seen just underneath the the title in the Google search results, to make sure it wasn't too long and included some of the keywords, and actually was a bit more of the text was a bit more of a call to action, really. So if people were interested in that, it gave people an example of what was on the page and how the page is going to help them. The meta description won't help with moving your search position on Google per se, but it might encourage people to click on that link, which could possibly help improve your search position. We also added much more product information, testimonials from customers, FAQs, lots of FAQs, and then images of products, of the process, descriptions of the process, comparisons between products. I mean, it started building, basically. It wasn't done in a day. It's actually done over a series of 2 months of adding in the content as it was written, as it was compiled, as we thought of more ideas, but essentially adding in a lot of value and content that was already on the site in different places and bringing it into this one place. Also, keyword variations are really important. Chris did some great help on that in terms of coming up with other keyword variations that would support our main one, so that Claire could sprinkle that in the content when she passed it through to the copywriter. We added in the FAQ scheme markup and made some of the changes to make the website a bit more presentable, as well as making sure it was indexed in Google Search Console as well, or making some tweaks to Yoast, I should say. We also got all the links from related news articles and knowledge bases linked back to the landing page. That was cool because there were maybe 1 or 2 of links already, but there was lots of content out there. So bringing it all back in was really important. And then we had another review down the line. I think it was a month later, where we reviewed the site and looked at how far we've come. Can we make further changes? So this is how the website looks now. I've taken several screenshots. It's an incredibly long screenshot. And it was just to try and give you the impression of how long this page actually is. What I'm going to try and do now, if this is going to work, is just share my screen, and we're going to have a look at the site as it stands. So here's the Selmac site. Hopefully you can all see that. Let's go through to their site, Fiber Laser. Dismiss that. So the point of this page is to capture everyone who's looking for the sort of broad term of the CNC Fiber Laser. They're not looking for a specific product yet. As you can see further down the page, we've got some products listed on here, but this is for people who are looking for a fiber laser but don't know which one they want. So this page is all about helping people decide and talking in and around that topic. Let's have a look, Chris. I think we'll see if we can talk through some of the changes we added on here. I think one of the simple ones was that this title at the top was either a bold tag or a heading 3. So one of the key things we need to do is just uplift that a little bit.
It was a bold tag, I think, then.
Yeah, I think it was. So really, that's just it's just considered a bit of text as far as Google goes, but potentially adding that as a title, a heading 2 in this case, gave it a potentially a slightly higher. What would you call it, Chris? A slightly higher ranking in the order of content?
Yeah, giving it a H2. So basically, I always explain heading tags as your H1 is, as you imagine you're writing a Word document or a piece of content. Your H1 is effectively your title of your piece of content, and then your H2s are your subheadings, and then H3s are your subheadings, and so on. So it's just basically saying this page is about CNC fiber laser, and then the heading of giving it a subheading of CNC fiber laser cutting machines is just sort of reinforcing the topic of the page straight away.
And I think something you've done for us a few times, which is incredibly helpful because we pass it straight on to a copywriter, is to not only do the report on what needs to improve on a page, but put a skeletal outline into place. And say, well, I want the title to be this. These are the core heading 2 tags, then some heading 3 tags. This is maybe some image alt text, maybe a list here talking about this. You're not writing any content, but you're putting in the sort of broad definitions of what we need to fill in.
I call it a content wireframe. So I'm basically saying these are the headings you need to have, and I'll work out how many of the exact keyword that you're looking to rank for you need, how many variations, how many partials, and then, like you said, whether you need to have lists or etc. etc. Put that together, and then you can give that to a copywriter who can just fill in the blanks, basically.
Yeah, I'd even say if you don't have a copywriter and you're managing it yourself, working on your page as an outline is really effective. Just thinking about those core heading topics and keywords, and then filling in the blanks from there.
Write about as well.
Yeah, I think it makes it a lot easier, because it's quite daunting to look at a page like this and say, God, I've got to prepare 1,500, 2,000, 5,000 words on this subject. That's impossible. It's not. You just got to take it a step at a time and break it up into different components.
Yeah, you don't have to do it all at once either. That's
would you say it's probably better to build it up over a time anyway?
I would, yes. I would go in at go in at the sort of 1,000, 1,500 words, typically to start with, and then add more as necessary, and add more in relation to what are your competition doing, what does Google think is a good page, and like I said, page 1 leaves clues.
Yeah, and you'll probably need to do that over time as other people improve their pages in response to your competition. So essentially the page, I mean, forget about the specific titles on here, but essentially the page stopped around about here. So just after related news and case studies, and there weren't so many of those at that point. So the machine was quite, the page was quite top heavy. We had a brief intro. We did have a link through to the machines, which was quite useful, and then links through to related information. So we already knew there was this other information available, and this core page was linking out to them. So that was great. However, we need to do a bit more work. So further down the line, what Claire started doing is adding in content for each of the machines. So really pulling together what those machines are about, why they use it, why they're useful, key benefits for each machine. And in fact, she's got here the whole range at the top with some relevant images, and then looking at each machine, specific testimonials, as I mentioned, and then obviously call to action so they can click through and see that particular machine. So actually, this is quite useful for someone who doesn't know which machine they want. They don't have to click in and out of each machine to view that, which is, from a usability point of view, a bit of a pain. They can actually just scroll down this list and read the website, picking out the core titles, because it's easier for them to see, seeing different images on here as well. So that was the first stage, was to produce this material and basically put all of these, all of the product content, sort of bring it onto this page and get it rewritten so we're not creating duplicate content on the site, because we don't want the pages to look like the product pages for each of these to look like duplicate content. And then further down the list, it's really starting to embellish the page. So this is the next stage that Claire took, which was to write about fiber. What is fiber laser? How does it work? Some of the details in the technical sides for fiber laser. Looking at exactly how a laser machine works, into a lot of detail here with some diagrams. And I love this. This is where I think the page starts getting really good from a detail point of view. I don't know, or we haven't looked at how far people are really going down the page to look at all of this, but I think from a expanding on the topic point of view, it's brilliant, because it's really talking about this niche. And then some other benefits. Starting to have some Q&As, FAQs in here, and then that's the end of it. So it's turned what was quite a short page to begin with into something quite long, authoritative, and really quite interesting. Let's go back to this now. There was one something I haven't looked at on there, but there are lots of other little things that needed doing. I think you also mentioned breadcrumbs on the product pages. So going into each of one of the sub laser products, we had breadcrumbs, which are links back to previous pages that refer to them on the page, but they weren't very effectively linked. So that's something we made sure was linked. And also making sure that in the first paragraph of each of those knowledge base or product pages, we were linking back to this landing page as well to really give this hub and spoke approach. So you've got the hub in the middle, which is the landing page, and then all of the resource content, products, knowledge base, all around the outside. Okay, anything more to add to that particular stage of going through anything we've missed?
Not really. The only thing I would say is, there's an additional comment, is the unintended positive consequences of doing that, which is obviously, improving the rankings, but also things like keeping people on the page for longer, lower bounce rate. There's lots of unintended positive consequences of having such a thorough, authoritative page. But also probably worth mentioning that it doesn't mean that everybody's page needs to be this big, because it depends on the the sector you're working in, your competition. Like I said, you need to refer back to page one. Page one gives you clues. The correlation report will, and an audit will tell you what's necessary. But it just so happened that in this case for Salmac, this is what was required. So it is on a case-by-case basis. You can't just say, okay, right, because Salmac have done this and they're ranking #1 for that keyword, I can apply that to my site. That's not the case. I just wanted to make that clear to people, that you need to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still more we can do here. I don't think they've got many videos of the fiber laser, but if they, I would recommend them. They make some videos and put them on here. It might be, and I know they've done this for other machines in the past, but the owners of the business can talk through some of the machines, do actual comparisons, live comparisons, so they can show people how it works. That's really what's missing from this page at the moment. Another unintended, or perhaps intended consequence, is that by marking up your page with structured data, you've got a chance that some of those FAQ questions might get shown on the Google search result. And I think some of the benefits of having this additional structured data, well marked up images, and also video, as well as having a well-optimized page, is you start to dominate the search results as well, don't you, Chris? You start to have more of your results being shown on the page.
Absolutely, and you've got more chance of having things like featured snippets, which are the big box big organic box you can get at the top of the page. You've got opportunities to be found via image search as well. People, some sort of underrated way of finding things. People looking for an image or something will often get to your site if you've got good image optimization, well named images, etc. There's lots and lots of benefits to doing this. It obviously takes a lot of time and effort.
It does, but I mean, we can compare this through to pay-per-click or other online advertising, where you might get a more instant result for an perhaps initially lower fee, but over time you've got to keep paying that fee.
From SEO is huge, comparable to other types of marketing, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased because what I do, but PPC has got a place, and you should be part of a marketing strategy. But in terms of pure return on investment over in the medium to long term, I don't think you can beat SEO. No,
that's right. I mean, the investment they've made in this, it's just purely in time. If we forget the budget for bringing us in on it, that this will pay back over time continually, and they'll need to tweak and update and improve, but it will pay back. Whereas PPC, the moment you stop paying pay-per-click, if you stop paying for your advertising, you'll stop getting the leads. So step 3. So we've done all the work. Now we've got to see if it's actually made any difference at all. And for some time it didn't. It really took, I think Claire's content updating took between a month to 2 months. It was done over that period. Not a lot happened at the beginning while the copywriter being engaged, and we sort of worked things out. And then the copy started going on and started being embellished. We had another review and we had some more ideas out of that. So it took around 2 months really. And didn't jump to #1. So it jumped from nothing to #3 in about 2 months, because we crucially made sure it was indexed. and then Claire did all the work, and I did some of the web work after Chris's recommendations, and then a month later jumped to number 1, which we were very pleased about. Very happy, because not only is this going to help from a business point of view, purely the having it number 1 means there are more people seeing that page, more people clicking through, but also it's good from our point of view to actually show that this works. It's worth putting the effort in to get a payoff like this.
Just confirms that the recommendations work and work.
Yeah, which is always nice, isn't it? Even though when you and I know what we're doing, it's nice when things really pay off well like this. Because sometimes search optimization can take longer and more effort and time to be able to get these sort of results.
It always depends on really 2 things really. 1, where you're starting from, how much of effort has gone into the site already, and 2, how competitive the area you're working in is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think before we go on to what a keyword correlation report is, I'll just go on to a question from Heidi here, as it's kind of relevant to what we've been talking about. So I'll just read it out. Heidi says, as a tourism site built in WordPress, we have intro pages for different categories. And, I've worked with Heidi on this. We have a brief allowance for description before the directory listing shows. And it's quite brief, isn't it, in terms of how it works? You've got a title, maybe restaurants in Herefordshire, and then a small description, and then it really goes on to the listing. So all of Heidi's members would be under in a restaurant, in the restaurant category, would be shown on there. She says we want to rank better in each section, and can see that the content would make this happen. Yeah, I think so. Would we need a different setup? So like having an independent page for each section, like a dedicated landing page, as an intro to the sections to enable better content and keyword phrases. But we don't want to add more clicks when customers are searching. So let us see if we can identify that. So what you're saying is, you've got the directory listing, but now after seeing this, understand that having more content and the right content, let's say, to help answer their question that Google's trying to give the right result for. Would it work better by having dedicated landing page for, say, restaurants in Herefordshire? And really talking much more about all the different types of restaurants, different types of eating, following all the sort of guidance we've put in here, and then maybe having the listings on that page as well, or linking through to the listings page, because we're quite limited, as I remember, on Heidi's site into what can actually go on these category pages. So I don't know, Chris, can I maybe get your view on that? I don't know if you've seen that particular. Yeah, so this is a Eat, Sleep, Live Herefordshire.
My initial thoughts are she could get more content on this page. She could use accordions to get it on there, so that she doesn't have to have lots of content, particularly in view. And that there are, yes, I mean, in short, there are some bits and pieces that could be done to improve the ranking of that particular page. I'd always go back to the kind of starting point of saying, you should really have a site audited first to see, where you're starting from, what starting point are, and is there any underlying issues? Obviously, I can't see those issues from a very quick look. I'm just looking at it from a perspective of her question. But I think you could fairly easily add additional content to this page, which would help. And ultimately doing, a keyword correlation report on restaurants in Herefordshire and looking at what people are searching for, because they're probably searching things like, best restaurant in Herefordshire, or, particular type of food. They might be looking for an Italian restaurant in Herefordshire. Yeah, and
more specific.
Doesn't mean you have to have landing pages for each of those, different types of search queries. What you need to do is just make sure that you cover off those topics lightly on the page. So in this case, yes, more content done in a strategic fashion, but my advice would be, have a look at the overall health of the site via an audit, and also look at a keyword correlation report to see what keywords are people are actually typing in, and where there potentially are, potentially where are the large volume keywords that they're not optimized for at the moment.
I think there's a specific issue with Heidi's site. No offense, Heidi, it's just how the system is made, that in the way you add listings, is that it might actually be difficult to add more content in, because these are dynamically generated pages and you have a sort of a little text area where you can type the description. And I think what Heidi's wondering is, what if you were to make a new page where you're being, your landing page, if you will. So you've got your product listing or your listings page, which kind of has to stay the same to some degree, but then you create a landing page as well. Is that going to cause issues, having those two pages which might be competing against each other?
Because you could have with what they call keyword cannibalization. So you've got two pages trying to rank for the same keyword, and therefore neither page ranks well.
Yeah, and we've had that before. We've had that problem and sort of resolved it on various sites.
It's one of those things that if you can avoid creating the problem in the first place, it's better. But if you do have that problem, then ultimately it can be fixed, as we know. Just again, looking at that page using some of my tools whilst you're talking there, and I can see that she's ranking for restaurants in Herefordshire. According to my tool, she's ranking sort of top of page 2. So that's 150 searches a month for that particular keyword. So there's definitely room for improvement. Getting her onto page 1 wouldn't be too difficult, and there's obviously some more traffic available there. So I guess I wouldn't go for a individual landing page for each type of restaurant. I don't think that would be good, because you're diluting the page.
Yeah, and it's a nightmare to manage as well. It's and that is a big consideration when doing this. Is you've got to make sure that the process works for you and that you can actually keep up to date with all of this.
I mean, ultimately, she's got restaurants in Herefordshire is not a massively competitive keyword. But again, like I said earlier, there's things that the associated keywords are like best restaurants in Herefordshire, top restaurants in Herefordshire. People are searching for these kind of things, and her page is not optimized for those additional sort of secondary terms.
Yeah, so that could be where FAQs come in. What is the best restaurant in Herefordshire? Or what are the top 10 restaurants in Herefordshire? And that may be content that can go on the page. It might not. It might be that technically it's going to be tricky to get it on there. Would you say then maybe creating a blog post or something separate that can link back to
like
the
page? Top 10 restaurants in Herefordshire would be a good piece of content, given that when you search for restaurants in Herefordshire, the first 2 listings are the 10 best restaurants from both are from TripAdvisor. So, a very authoritative site, but nothing to say that you couldn't, with the right piece of content and the right work, outrank them. But yes, I think it's difficult because I'm doing it a little bit blind without obviously diving into it. But personally, there's probably lots of quick wins available.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I appreciate that. That's thank you for that. I think it's fascinating to look at it. Well, Heidi, we need to talk more about that.
I'll mention whilst I remember, Ben, if she can get the restaurants that she lists on her site to link back to that page, that would be very helpful for.
We have spoken about this, Heidi, haven't we? Having some sort of page, having a reason, having a sort of plan so you can get them to link back, whether it's a link from their blog or talking about you in some way. Yeah, that would be great. I think the most difficult thing would be for Heidi to pick 10 of her members who are the best. I don't think your members would like that. Heidi, there's probably lots we can talk about. I don't think we've got enough time on it now. Maybe backlinks and link building is something that we can tackle in another webinar. I think that would be good for Chris to join us again on that. Chris, perhaps you can talk about the keyword correlation report. I'll just set the scene. So essentially, this is a report that you are able to generate from a bit of software, but it does require interpreting. So that's where certainly your expertise comes in. It's not just something that we can go to a website and it's going to spit out what we want. It needs your someone who really knows what they're doing to put in the right data and get out the right data and then help make suggestions. But essentially, it's a comparison of your page against competitors' pages based on the keywords you want to rank for.
I'd go a bit further than that. I'd say it's a correlation report. And what it does is it measures over 2,000 factors that are measurable from the top 100 search results, and then basically does a lot of complicated mathematics in the background and spits it out into a huge Excel sheet, which then, as you said, needs to be interpreted. But it's the interpretation that is the difficult bit, if you ask me. Plug in the information into the software is one thing, but trying to interpret the data is another. And basically, you can then go through and highlight effectively quick wins. So, things like word count. If you've got too many or too little words, that's a quick win. You can quite easily add extra content. If you've not got enough, exact, partial, or variants of your keywords in your heading tags, that's another quick win. So there's lots of quick wins that it will point out to you that you can do. That might only take you a few minutes. But ultimately, the report is crunching data from. It takes about 6 minutes for a report to be generated. If you think about it from quite a powerful PC, given all the data that is pulling down from the top 100. So yeah, over 2,000 factors measured, or 2,000 pieces of data measured from each site, and then obviously correlation is measured to see how strongly a particular factor correlates with those people or those sites that are on page one. And
the difference in your site.
So where are you deficient in comparison to the people on page one? What are you lacking? What do you need more of, less of, etc.?
Yeah, it makes fascinating reading. I mean, I don't know, there's a ton of tabs on there of lots of information. But essentially what we do is Chris would run the report, and then Chris would go through and pick out the key wins. There's no reason why you wouldn't come back, run the report again if you need to improve it further. Or you were number one, and you start seeing yourself lag behind.
One thing to say as well is obviously periodically Google run their broad core algorithm updates. So if it's published that there's been an algorithm update, often we can do what's called a differentiation report. So basically we take a report from before an algorithm update, and then we can take one after, and then we can look at using the software, we can see what's changed. So there's some sort of I don't know whether you call it clues or insights. It doesn't, it's not certainly an exact science, but it gives you insights to what may have changed in the algorithm of why your page has gone down or up, etc. So that's very useful to have that ability to do that as well. So if you've all of a sudden gone down and you're thinking, what's happened? I haven't done anything. If we've run a report prior to that happening, and then we run a report after that's happened, we can use it as a diagnostics tool to work out where do we start to try and improve the problem.
Yeah, and it's I mean, as you take a very scientific approach, I mean, there are known things that are generally good, but some change over time. But effectively, you're trying to use data here. What is likely based on a correlation between who's number one and where you are to improve your site's position, but not guaranteed by any means.
No, but I've not yet failed to make improvements using one of these keyword correlation reports. So
good, excellent. So I just want to give you some broad on-page SEO tips. As I say, very broad. And Chris did say before that it's going to be specific upon your how your page is ranking already, your industry and so on. So this is just a very broad idea. But essentially, if your page doesn't have the keyword on it that you want to rank for, it's not going to rank. So make sure that you've got the right keyword you want to rank for, and it's in the right places, like the title, the meta description, and heading, at the very least, if not for throughout your content as a variety of keywords. We often talk about creating the ultimate guide, maybe making it 10 times better than your competitors. I think that's a good place to start, thinking about what you can make that is going to show or teach or demonstrate the very best in that particular area. Using a variety of content. So we've talked about lots of different ones, but making sure you maybe use the idea of variety to structure out your page, to put that wireframe together. So put the headings in place, write the keyword, maybe write the introduction meta description first, then put the other keywords in, then think about some of the images you might want to include. and then lists and bullet points, and start fleshing it out from that point of view. If you do have any other related content, make sure it links back to that supporting page. We'll probably talk about this another time in terms of backlink building, but if you can get external links from other websites to that landing page, all the better. But I think we'll talk more about that in detail in another webinar. Make sure you're using any relevant markup schema for your site. We've talked about FAQ schema, and in the session notes that eventually get published, I'll make sure there's a link out to that. But there is lots of other schema markup as well that's relevant to events, recipes, tons. I mean, so depending on your niche, you might want to find out the schema that works. And also make sure it's indexed. So use Google Search Console to do that. What's next? If you found that interesting and would like to get an audit with Chris and me to really look through your site in detail, then you can go to our Inventive People sites and have a look for... first of all, if we haven't really worked with you much on it, then you definitely need an audit. It's well worth the money. It's going to give you a lot of insight, and you'll see a lot of... you will definitely see some benefits and improvements. It may not be getting you to rank #1 initially, but you'll see a lot of other improvements and side effects from that, and it's really useful. And then looking at the keyword correlation report as well. So if there are specific pages that you want to laser focus on and build that so you're better ranking, so you become #1, then we can do that as well. That's keyword correlation report. So have a look at Inventive People and look at the marketing side of things, or just get in touch. You know, I'm hello@ratherinventive.com, and then we can sort that out for you. So I want you to think about what you'd like to do over the next 30 days. What one thing from this do you think is important? Is it getting an audit, you know, calling me up saying, hey, let's get that audit sorted? Or is it just, let's have a look at one of my pages and just take some time to rewrite that wireframe of what it might look like? So have a think about that. While you do, I don't think, we never have time for Q&A. I always add this at the end, but we never have time. We did have a little bit during. What we do, I thought, sort of preparing the slides for this, actually a great topic next, we haven't covered it yet, is Google Search Console. Now, I think there's tons of information in Google Search Console, even if you're not doing search optimization. I think there's so many things in here that gives you a real insight into the health of your site. So if you aren't familiar with it, this will be the webinar where we'll take you through, maybe do a little bit of a walkthrough as well. I think it's a fascinating app and actually has got better over time in recent years. For people who are new and maybe members as well, make sure you're enjoying everything that we've got here. Do check out previous webinars. We've got 15 of them now. Lots of tools and resources, and we've got our podcast as well. So if it's easy, if you find it easier to listen to this sort of thing and learn while you're in the car doing the washing up, walking the dog, just like me, then you've got that available too. I will actually send you a link to that now. See if I can do this. Here we are. Let's try that link. So I'm going to share this link with you now. If you haven't been into the club Basecamp, then do so, because everything that we talk about is posted on there and more. You know, if you come to a webinar, then I'll have tons more resources which I'll post on there as well. If you liked this particular SEO webinar but want to know a bit more, have a look at my SEO strategy one. It's definitely got, it's a bit simpler, a bit higher level. And actually, if some of this went over your head, I'd go and revisit that and then maybe come back to this. And do tell your friends. This club is only £250 for 12 months. And if you give them the code BOOST50, they get 50% off. I mean, they are going to be very happy with you for that. You'll also get a 60-minute one-to-one call with me, and you can access everything from our entire back catalogue straight away the moment they join. So they will be very happy puppies for that. I think that's all we've got time for. Hopefully you've got some actions noted down that you're going to cover over the next 30 days. Our next club session is on the 26th of May. We're going to be talking about Google Search Console at 1 p.m. Do stay in touch and connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or everything like that. Thank you so much, Chris. I do appreciate your time. Hopefully more than you found that interesting too.
Happy to help.
Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.